We're in Lovell Canyon today. It's in southern Nevada between Las Vegas and Pahrump off Highway 160. And we are at the upper end of Lovell Canyon Road. There you can see the entrance to the Torino Ranch, and you take a left onto an unpaved road, which is Lovell Summit Road. It's about a quarter mile to the trailhead for Lovell Canyon Trails, and we're going to take the Lovell Canyon Loop. That's one of 3 trails off that trailhead. The other 2 are Schaefer Springs Loop and Griffith Shadow Loop. Here we go. And here we are at the Lovell Canyon Trailhead area. And let me explain what we've got here. There are actually 2 trails. There's the Lovell Canyon Loop, the Schaefer Springs Loop, and yes, I can't count, there's a 3rd trail, Griffith Shadow Loop. But today we're just looking at the Lovell Canyon Loop and Schaefer Springs Loop. The Lovell Canyon Loop is lower in the canyon. At the top of the Lovell Canyon Loop, there's a branching trail leading higher in Lovell Canyon, and that's the Schaefer Springs Loop. So you do the Lovell Canyon Loop circuit, you connect with the Schaefer Springs Loop circuit, and that's what we've done in the video today. So what you can do is, I put them on separate pages and videos on Las Vegas Area Trails. You can do the Lovell Canyon Loop first, and then at the top, take the Schaefer Springs Loop second. Now, maybe you just want to do the Lovell Canyon Loop. That's why I put them on separate pages. But if you do the Schaefer Springs Loop, yeah, you will have done both loop trails. We take the Lovell Canyon Loop in a counterclockwise direction, and we take the Schaefer Springs Loop in a clockwise direction. And at the top of the Schaefer Springs Loop, the Griffith Shadow Loop splits off and goes yet even further, except what I would do is I would take the Griffith Shadow Loop in a clockwise direction, taking the west side of Lovell Canyon as you're looking up the canyon, up to the summit of the Griffith Shadow Loop, if you're taking that loop. And there's a page on Las Vegas Area Trails that shows the Griffith Shadow Loop. But you'd take that up to the upper end, which is just a spectacular view of Lovell Canyon. Then it descends back into Lovell Canyon, crosses to the east side. So it crosses from the west to the east side, and there it becomes very, the Griffith Shadow Loop becomes very sketchy. And I actually, on that page of LasVegasAreaTrails.com, in that adventure, I lost the Griffith Shadow Loop for a while, for about the upper mile on the east side after having crossed the canyon. I lost it for about a mile, but I took the main wash down the canyon until I reconnected, and I actually connected with a part of the Schaefer Springs Loop. So if all this sounds confusing because we're talking about 3 different trails, just look on the pages on LasVegasAreaTrails.com. There's one for Lovell Canyon Loop, Schaefer Springs Loop, and Griffith Shadow Loop. And there I'll explain how each of the loops interact. Today we're going to take the Lovell Canyon Loop. So here we go. Very nice trail. This trail begins ascending around 200 feet hill, and that's a good example of what you're going to be experiencing on this trail. There are a number of ascents and descents along this trail. But as I mentioned, it's a great trail. I've been spending a lot of time in the wilderness on the Wilson Ridge on the east side of Lovell Canyon, on the Rainbow Mountains Upper Crest Ridgeline, also on the east side, and on Sexton Ridge. So it's nice to be on an actual trail. Those other adventures are pathless wilderness. Very, very beautiful but isolated, and a lot more difficult than this trail. Yet I'm out of breath. Part of the reason is what you will experience if you do a Lovell Canyon Trail in mid-November. It's cold, around 35 degrees, and just getting out of a warm car and heading up a hill, I'm experiencing both the altitude change from Las Vegas and the sudden cold. So it takes a little getting used to, but the coldness wears off very quickly, and you're left with the experience of an incredible, spectacular trail. And here are three of the main plants you're going to be seeing on this trail. Here's Ashley silk tassel. A lot of this throughout the trail. And then on this side is Gamble's oak. Now the ashy silk tassel creates a tassel of flowers that turns into berries. And there we go. And I said it's one of the main shrubs that you're going to find on this trail. It gets so thick that it creates walls of impenetrable brush on either side of the trail and partially blocking out the trail. But it's a beautiful little plant. And there you see the tasseled berries, and it has their white flowers in the spring. And then, as I mentioned, Gamble's oak. These grow along a lot of the washes in the spring mountains, and here you can see a little wash below. And one thing that helps them survive some of the higher temperatures of the summer is that they have root systems that can go down 200 or more feet. So Gamble's oak, and this oak has changed color already. The colors have faded, the fall colors have faded, but it makes some beautiful, brilliant fall colors. We'll see if we can catch some of those further up the trail. And then here you can see more of the ashy silk tassel on the left. And now here's some yucca. So yeah, ashy silk tassel. So you can see how abundant these shrubs are on the trail. And by the way, did I say there were three plants? Actually 4. I added the yucca, but then a lot of pine, and I believe these are pinyon pines. May be wrong on that one, but yeah, a lot of pines, and all these plants have adapted to live in a very dry environment, very hot environment. So what you'll see is the leaves are sometimes curled, and this limits the sun, drying the plant out, helps it preserve its moisture. And you see more of the silk tassel here. Okay, we are ascending this first hill. As I mentioned, a lot of ascent and descent, and you can look back already. It's just been a few minutes. We've reached this height. You're looking at some of the ridge lines on the western side, lower western side of Lovell Canyon. We'll explore those at some point. Approaching the first high point. And now, yeah, we're on the western side of the canyon. You can look across the canyon from these high points and up the canyon. We're looking across right now to the Wilson Ridge on the east side of Lovell Canyon. We'll see more of the Wilson Ridge as we go, but this is where the views begin. Here's the Wilson Ridge opening up, more spectacular, and here we're looking down to the Torino Ranch where we began. And then points along the Wilson Ridge that we can see immediately from here. There is what I call the southern high point, and it is, as opposed to the northern high point, which is Harris Mountain. You'll see that ahead in a moment, which is at the summit of the Wilson Ridge. The southern high point is about 8,500 feet, so it's a tall peak in itself. And then you head further north on the Wilson Ridge, and Harris Mountain at the summit of the Wilson Ridge, the northern summit, is at about, I think it's 10,014 feet. So southern high point. See what else that I've got a loop just below the southern high point and above the southern high point on LasVegasAreaTrails.com. And here you can see other high points. And one thing about the Wilson Ridge is that every one of these high points, and there are a lot of high points on this ridge, and each one of them is a couple hundred, 300 feet. So traversing the Wilson Ridge is quite the challenge of topping a number of high points. But as I was about to say, each of the high points has an approach ridge. So when you're traversing the Wilson Ridge, you get up to these high points and you're about out of energy. You've already ascended 2,500 to 3,000 feet to get up to these high points, and then to traverse part of the Wilson Ridge after that is like one bridge too far, one ridge too far. Anyway, yeah. So I believe this high point here on the other side of it begins the La Madre Mountains Ridge line, and it heads off to the east. And over, you see kind of a shallow saddle. Here is what I call the Switchback Spring Pinnacles, and you see adventures for all of these on LasVegasAreaTrails.com. But Switchback Springs Pinnacles are a potential point where you could actually descend. It's pretty harrowing, that descent. I haven't done it yet. It looks like it's possible, but you could potentially descend into Red Rock Canyon. Should be a great traverse between the two canyons, Lovell and Red Rock. and then we go up to two pinnacles. The one on the left I call um, the mini Matterhorn North Twin Pinnacle, and the one on the right is the mini Matterhorn Pinnacle. Now, they don't look like a Matterhorn from this point, but when you're standing on them, you're looking almost straight down on three sides, and you're on this pinnacle. So, I call them the mini Matterhorn Pinnacles. And then over here, Red Rock Summit, and you can assess that through the Rocky Gap Road entrance. And I've got adventures on Las Vegas area trails for all of these, but they are wilderness, pathless wilderness adventures, and you need a little wilderness navigational skill to be able to handle them, but they're all class 2, meaning you don't have to use your hands to climb over anything. You can walk basically up to these pinnacles, and the view is truly spectacular when you're on the Wilson Ridge, along the whole Wilson Ridge. So here we go. Let's continue. Okay, we're about to round the first corner here, and you can see an expansive view opening up of upper Lovell Canyon. And let's pause a moment just to take a look at what we're seeing. And Lovell Canyon has got to be one of the most beautiful canyons in all of southern Nevada. Anyway, yeah, look at this view. There's Griffith Peak at the north western edge of the canyon. Then you see a saddle going down and then up to Harris Mountain. As I mentioned, Harris Mountain is at the northern high point of the Wilson Ridge. Then you can see the Wilson Ridge stretching downward, and more of the ridge line than we've seen up to this point. Stretching further south, and that Wilson Ridge is going to extend all the way to the southern tip of Lovell Canyon at Highway 160. Very beautiful, isolated ridge. And I believe I found on some of those approach ridges, I found some historical sites for potentially Native American. Anyway, yeah, let's look down into Lovell Canyon. One great thing about Lovell Canyon is that where a lot of southern Nevada is brown as far as the hills, and there it's all high desert really. Lovell Canyon, for some reason, is very lush with shrubbery, grass, flowers. We'll see that when we get down into the canyon, but incredibly beautiful. And then here, Griffith Peak, as I mentioned, and off to the left is the other major upper ridge line, Sexton Ridge. We'll look at that a little more later. Sexton Ridge leads down from Griffith Peak and borders the west side of Lovell Canyon. And here's more of Sexton Ridge opening up, descending from to the left of Griffith Peak. You'll notice that there are no trees, or very few trees on this ridge, and the reason is the 2013 Carpenter fire. That's all burned out on the ridge, but on the good side, when you're up on this ridge, the views are just spectacular. So that's something to attempt at some time, and you can see some adventures on Sexton Ridge and how to get to Sexton Ridge on LasVegasAreaTrails.com in the Lovell Canyon section. And there we have Upper Lovell Canyon, Harris Mountain on the right, Griffith Peak on the left. In a bit, we'll be descending into Lovell Canyon and taking this trail in a counterclockwise direction. Here's another beautiful common plant in Lovell Canyon, and these are junipers. Here's a juniper, and they grow to really tall, majestic trees down at this point in Lovell Canyon, and you can see this juniper tree has juniper berries. Let's take a look at the juniper berries. I hear that some varieties are edible. I don't know which ones. I would really study before I started eating them, but and I believe you've got to prepare them in some way. They've got a kind of bitter taste, but anyway, some varieties are edible, and if you can find out which ones, you may have some good uh, sustenance here on the Lovell Canyon Trail. And as I mentioned, this trail has a lot of descent and ascent, and so be prepared that you're not going to get to the top of something and then go downhill all the way. You're going to have a lot of rolling hills. And also, when you're looking at all the views and all the plants on the trail, watch out for rocks that are peeking up that will trip you if you decide to run. And you could run on this trail. It's a very nice trail, but pick up your feet so that you don't trip and bang your head on a rock. Okay, along with the ashy silk tassel, here's another very common shrub you'll find on the Lovell Canyon Trail, and it joins the ashy silk tassels in creating walls of impenetrable brush further up on the pathless ridges that I've shown you. This is pointed leaf manzanita, and you can identify it by the red bark and the pointed leaves. And notice how they're a bit curled once again and they've got a waxy surface. All of this is to conserve moisture in this dry environment. But yeah, these are very abundant and beautiful as you continue to roll along this trail up and down, still descending. And here's a pretty amazing juniper tree. A lot of people have juniper shrubs in their landscaping, but not many have juniper trees. Very majestic here for a juniper. And this trail is just lined with juniper trees like this and pines like the one you see here. Okay, there are the peaks in upper Lovell Canyon, but I just wanted to point out another high point coming into view now is Handy Peak. And here you see it immediately ahead. It's a great landmark for Lovell Canyon. And one of the reasons I'm pointing out all these landmarks is that if you decide to go on some of the pathless ridges, it's important to know where all the landmarks are in order to make your way along, not get lost, head down the wrong ridge line or to a cliff dead end somewhere. I don't use GPS. I get to know the wilderness area very thoroughly. And as a result, I'm not looking at a screen to see where I am. I'm not necessarily looking at trails, at least on the ridgeline adventures, but I have a 360-degree perspective rather than a linear perspective most of the places I go. And the reason I can traverse wilderness like this without relying on instruments is just the awareness of all the reference points along the way. Here's a look down into a stretch of Lovell Canyon Wash. The reason I'm pointing this out is that you can see that even in November, it's moist down there. I don't know if it's flowing, but there's water that continues to flow underground, which is what the Gamble's Oak taps into when it sends its roots way down. And another reason I'm pointing it out is that this year has been uncommonly wet. And as a result, there's a lot more brush in the canyon. There's more bushes and flowers and very beautiful. When we get down to the canyon, you will see. But the reason that there is so much vegetation is the summer that we had, spring, summer, the winter before, were some of the wettest on record. We'll see what happens this winter. Some of the rapidly waning colors in the fall, late fall, Gamble's Oak. About a month earlier, or a couple of weeks earlier actually, these um, Gamble's Oak leaves are just brilliant reds and yellows, maybe mid-October. Approaching the first major trail division, well, the first and only trail division, and here you can see the Lovell Canyon Loop and Schaefer Springs Loop continue in this direction. And also, yeah, this is the counterclockwise direction for the loops. And here is the clockwise direction for the loops. And we are 1.6 miles up the Lovell Canyon Trail system. Okay, at this point, this first trail division, let's head on the Lovell Canyon Loop in the counterclockwise direction. The trail is going to descend now into the Lovell Canyon wash. You'll get an idea of how beautiful that wash is and what it's like. And by the way, one thing I didn't say about ashy silk tassel is that the silk part of it is the leaves are covered with a fine, silky hair. And so that's the silk part of the ashy silk tassel. Here's another mountain plant called, wait for it, mountain mahogany. And you'll notice, again, the leaves are curled in order to limit the drying sun, dehydrate the plant, conserve its water. The ashy silk tassel has silk hairs on its leaves to help um, conserve its water. The pointed leaf manzanita has waxy leaves to conserve water. So all these plants have learned how to conserve water and create vast root systems in this dry desert, high desert environment. Another common desert plant, the prickly pear cactus. And you can see the spines, I mean the needles, very sharp. Don't run into it. They will stick to you and will try not to come out. And then here's the pears. Good food source for local animals. As they say, third time's a charm. Here we are approaching another little strand of Gamble's oak, and here you're getting an idea of the fall colors. Still not quite as brilliant as a month ago, but as you can see, very beautiful. And you can see these Gamble's oak plants from far away in the canyon, like in October, you see a brilliant yellow. Okay, now we're descending into Lovell Canyon, and I want to point out a rocky ridge line that goes right down to the base of Lovell Canyon. This is actually, if you are heading down the Lovell Canyon wash and you're coming down from one of the high ridges and you wonder where this trail begins, watch for this rocky ridge line. You see it descends down into the canyon, and the Lovell Canyon Trail meets Lovell Canyon just to the right of this little rocky pillar. And there you can see part of the canyon below. And then looking across, there's another rocky bluff outcrop. And so there's one on each side of the canyon. Watch for those two rocky outcrops, one on either side of the canyon, and that lets you know when you finally reached the Lovell Canyon Trail. if you're heading down Lovell Canyon Wash. And the reason I say this is that the wash is very clogged with brush, and if you're over on the other side and you miss this trail connection, yeah, you're in for a lot of additional brush that maybe you could have avoided if you'd found the right spot. But it gets very brushy in the lower canyon, and the going is very, very slow. And besides, when you get to the Torino Ranch, um, there will be a fence crossing the canyon, and you're basically on private property. I've crawled into that fence once. You really want to find this trail. Another thing about this rocky outcrop, you circle around the back side of it and head up, and that can be a good approach route to the Wilson Ridge above. Approach route from this point. So there are a few other approach routes to the Wilson Ridge. We'll look at those a little later, but this is one. Another look at this distinctive rocky ridge landmark leading down to Lovell Canyon and marking the entrance point for the Lovell Canyon Trail system. And now we're descending into the base of beautiful Lovell Canyon, and just notice the abundance of flowering plants in the canyon and how beautiful that makes the view up the canyon to the upper end of Lovell Canyon. Yeah, there you have it. Lovell Canyon in all its beauty. And now we round the corner for a second major trail division. Let's look at the choices here. You see this post? It marks the eastern end of the Griffith Shadow Loop. You cross over to the eastern side of the canyon, and then there's a trail that continues. However, it tends to be very hard to find. Once you've gone up about a mile, then you may need to descend into the canyon, stay in the canyon until you reconnect with the trail on the western side above. And then here are some of the choices available here. We've got the Lovell Canyon Loop heading up this direction, along with, let's see if we can get a little more light on that trail. Yeah, there's a little bit. Okay, and along with the Schaefer Springs Loop, which should have a junction in about 0.1 miles. So let's just check these out. Now we'll go ahead and head up the Lovell Canyon Loop. Okay, here we are continuing along the Lovell Canyon Loop Trail, ascending. We're ascending the edge of Handy Peak, and up at the top we'll see some more trail signs, I am guessing. Okay, we are continuing up the north side of Handy Peak on the Lovell Canyon Loop Trail, but just a few other pointers here. down toward Lovell Canyon, you can see where the Schaefer Springs Trail branched off to the right. At least when we were going in the other direction, branched off to the left this direction. And you can even see a point where it continues on the other side of Lovell Canyon on the east side. There's a portion of that trail. Schaefer Springs Loop heads up in this direction, crosses the canyon eventually, and then heads down the other side of the canyon and again crosses the canyon below. But here we are continuing up the north side of Handy Peak toward the highest portion of the Lovell Canyon Loop Trail. Okay, here we are approaching a familiar trail connection. And if you were taking Griffith's Shadow Loop in a clockwise direction, which is what I recommend, you'd head up in this direction. And that's what you'll see on the Griffith's Shadow Loop video and page on Las Vegas Area Trails. And let's do a quick 360-degree view from this high point on the Lovell Canyon Loop Trail. Looking up toward Griffith Peak, Saddle, Harris Mountain, Wilson Ridge descending, and here we're in the midst of ashy silk tassel and pointed leaf manzanita. Very thick at this point. There's Handy Peak. You can see a portion of the Wilson Ridge in the center there, the distance. And this is the trail continuing down toward the Lovell Canyon Trailhead. And again, we're taking this trail in a counterclockwise direction, the Lovell Canyon Loop Trail. And you can take it either clockwise or counterclockwise. It really doesn't matter. But if you're going to head up the Griffith Shadow Loop, I suggest you take that loop in a clockwise direction. So now continuing down toward the trailhead on the Lovell Canyon Loop, we're rounding the upper side of upper west side of Handy Peak. Okay, as we're heading down the Lovell Canyon Trail in the Loop Trail in a counterclockwise direction, let's just take a moment to do a quick 360-degree view of our surroundings. There you see the Wilson Ridge. On the east side of Lovell Canyon. And here's Handy Peak. And here's the Lovell Canyon Loop. And then above you can see Griffith Peak, Harris Mountain, Griffith on the left, Harris on the right. Well, let's take a look at this lower section on the Wilson Ridge. We'll trace it from the high point. I'll point out some of the high points there. This is the southern high point on the Wilson Ridge, 8,500 feet elevation, and then heading down. Right at this point where the Wilson Ridge takes a plunge downward, if you were to top this high point and continue behind, you would be heading on the La Madre Mountains ridgeline heading east. And then where the Wilson Ridge takes that plunge, there's a kind of saddle. At the end of the saddle is what I call the switchback spring pinnacles. You can see a page where we ascended to those pinnacles on Las Vegas area trails, and at the left side of those pinnacles, the lower left side, is where there is a potential descent into Red Rock Canyon. We don't know. Here are the two mini Matterhorn pinnacles, and then Red Rock Summit right there, overlooking Rocky Gap Road. So gives you an idea of the layout of the Wilson Ridge through that stretch. And then let's continue on down the Lovell Canyon Loop Trail, continuing to descend from the high point on the Lovell Canyon Loop Trail as we take it in a counterclockwise direction. Okay, as we continue descending the Lovell Canyon Loop Trail, here's a nice view. Here you can see Handy Peak. There used to be a loop around Handy Peak, but I think that is no longer. And the Lovell Canyon Trail actually, the loop trail loops around the far side of Handy Peak. The north side goes up. Basically, it descends down to the canyon, circles around Handy Peak, heads up the north side, and then winds down to where we are standing. We've been taking the Lovell Canyon Loop Trail in a counterclockwise direction, which works very well. And also returning from the Schaefer Springs Loop Trail, which we found on the lower far side of Handy Peak. Okay, here we are again at that first main trail division. And now I can put together these two trails, the Lovell Canyon Loop and the Schaefer Springs Loop. Lovell Canyon Loop heads in either direction. Here's where the direction you go if you want to take it counterclockwise. Here's the direction you want to go if you want to take it in a clockwise direction. Both directions, you're going to end up at this point. And at the far end of the Lovell Canyon Loop, the Schaefer Springs Loop begins on the north side of Handy Peak, and it makes a large loop beyond Handy Peak area. And the Lovell Canyon Loop is it's got a lot of lush vegetation here, tall vegetation, so you're in a forest here. On the other hand, when you begin the Schaefer Springs Loop, you're going to be in a wide open area and have some really majestic views of Lovell Canyon. And you'll see those on the Schaefer Spring Loop page and video of LasVegasAreaTrails.com. And then from this point, let's continue back down toward the trailhead, 1.6 miles to the main Lovell Canyon Trailheads. Continuing to return on the Lovell Canyon Loop, but let's take a look around. Here you can see the Wilson Ridge across the canyon. Pointed out a lot of those high points. In fact, maybe all of them. So I won't point them out again. See if you can recognize them. Upper Lovell Canyon in this afternoon lighting, just spectacular. And then brush on this side of the trail, so we won't circle around there. But yeah, look at this. You can trace Lovell Canyon all the way up to the Griffith Peak Harris Mountain saddle. Griffith Peak on the left, Harris Mountain on the right. And there are adventures in Las Vegas area trails that will take you up to both of those peaks from this spot down in Lovell Canyon. Then on the other side of the peaks, you have the Mount Charleston Wilderness. And here's the Torino Ranch / Children's Camp, where we started at the upper end of Lovell Canyon Road. And then just got to do this afternoon span of the Wilson Ridge across the canyon because the lighting is perfect. Here we're heading north. And basically you can see the whole upper section of the Wilson Ridge, all the way from Rocky Gap Road to Harris Mountain at the summit. And those peaks over there are on the lower side, the other side of Rocky Gap Road. So there are a few peaks on the Wilson Ridge, the far side of Rocky Gap Road. And here is Red Rock Summit on this side of Rocky Gap Road. And when you're standing on Red Rock Summit, you're looking straight down on the Bridge Mountain Trailhead at the upper, the high point on Rocky Gap Road. Rocky Gap Road goes between Red Rock Canyon and Lovell Canyon. And here we are heading back down to the Lovell Canyon Trailhead. And I won't record all the way down because we made quite a few video segments on the way up. And here we are back descending to the trailhead where we began on Lovell Summit Road, just a quarter mile above the upper end of Lovell Canyon Road where we parked. There's the campground below. So that concludes the Lovell Canyon Loop. It's a great starter for someone who's never been in Lovell Canyon before. Do the Lovell Canyon Loop and then you'll see connections to further trails. But this will give you a good experience of Lovell Canyon. And here we are back at the beast where we began, at the upper end of Lovell Canyon Road where it connects with Lovell Summit Road. Just a quarter mile up Lovell Summit Road takes you to that camping area where you find the trailheads. And as I mentioned, I'll put both the Lovell Canyon Loop and the Schaefer Springs Loop on separate videos. First, look at the Lovell Canyon Loop video, then the Schaefer Springs Loop video. Awesome adventure Let's do a quick 360. Beautiful area. Southern Nevada.